Hello, class. Good to see you again for this week. This week we are in chapter 6 in your textbook, but we are in the book of Leviticus, the Old Testament book of Leviticus. And that particular book is really interesting, where it's basically just a book of rules or laws. It's kind of like guidelines that God gave the Israelite or Hebrew people. And let's talk about this book. So, first of all, who wrote it? It's thought that many scholars think that Moses wrote it, but we're not really sure about that. Or maybe Moses could have dictated most of the information to some scribes. The reason why we think that Moses is probably an author is because many times the phrase is repeated in Leviticus, the Lord said to Moses. And also, it opens up in the first chapter of Leviticus where Moses receives this information from God, these rules from God, and gives them to the people that he's leading, the Israelite people. And so we think that perhaps that Moses had a good hand in writing this book. But honestly, many times with a lot of biblical writings, you're not for certain 100%. If Moses didn't write 100% of this book, perhaps other priests could have written it as well. Because this book is, the purpose of it is to give a manual on how to live holy. It could also serve as a manual for priests, because the priests in Old Testament times had to officiate these sacrifices, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But the whole purpose, remember, the purpose of the book of Leviticus is to serve as a manual or a guideline on how to live holy for God. Okay? Now, remember, if you look in the first chapter of Leviticus, you'll see that it opens up with Moses receiving the information. And this information or guidelines from God. And you want to understand also in the Old Testament that the Hebrew religion was not the only religion on earth. So there were Egyptians, and remember that it's African culture. They had their own religions, and Canaanite culture had religion, and many of those practices of religion had what's called polytheistic view of religion, where they may have had more than one God. The Hebrew religion believed in monotheism, where they only wanted one God, Yahweh. Okay, and so that was the difference in a lot of the clashes that you see between the Hebrews and other religions that are around them. And there's a lot of conflict because they believe that there should only be one God, and maybe there are other religions that have other pagan gods, and they bow down or they may worship these other gods that do certain things. Okay, so if you get a chance, I want you to read, Leviticus 11:44 through 45. And that is really like the central theme to this particular book. It simply wants people to live holy and to be holy like God is. And that's difficult, isn't it? And what God did with this particular book is just kind of give the people of Old Testament times a how to. Sometimes we just don't know how to do it, how to get right, or even if they were wrong, how to become better with what they may have done or fallen short of. Now, I want you to understand what an offering is. You'll see in the book of Leviticus and also in your writing that there was a lot of different type of offerings. And this is not like a money offering, but it's very similar to a money offering, but it was something that they would give up to God, something that they would offer to God. So it could have been like grain. Remember, grain was one of their big currencies. They needed grain, so it was something that they could offer to God. It could have been a burnt offering when that deals with an animal, where perhaps it was a young calf, an unblemished animal, and that particular animal was sacrificed, and that animal was offered up maybe during worship or some type of celebration, offered to God. So you'll see that some things you're saying, well, what is this offering? What's the whole thing of all these offerings and offering up animals and things of that sort? There is a reason. So here's the thing, what's up with the blood? Now, you'll see with animal sacrifices in the Old Testament, the blood is necessary. And so remember, we do things wrong. Humans sin. We do it every day, right? But God set up a guide in Leviticus that if they did something wrong, this is how you can atone with the appropriate sacrifice. So God would say, if you did this, then you get this type of animal. If you did this, then you get this. And it wasn't necessarily meant to save people or keep them from not going to heaven, but it was really meant to establish a better and healthy relationship with God. It was helping the person see, well, you know what? Ooh, I did something wrong. Let me get right. Okay. Now, many times we do things wrong. You have a trivia question that comes from chapter 10, Leviticus chapter 10. And I want you to read that chapter. There are two characters there, Abihu and Nadab. And I want you to read that and tell me what they did wrong. And that's definitely one of the reasons why we need the book of Leviticus, right? All right, so with this particular book, simply realize that Leviticus is a book of rules, tells people how to do something. And also, if you get a chance, go to Leviticus chapter 12. So ladies, those who have had babies, you will also see some directions that God even gave women after childbirth on what to do or when to come out. And I want you to read that if you get a chance. Leviticus chapter 12. It talked about, staying in a certain amount of time, or, not coming around people until a certain amount of time. And we don't follow all of those things today, but some of them kind of still ring true, where in certain cultures, the mom is more encouraged to stay at home for a while and don't come out until the babies are older, or don't come out for a while until you've healed up. So it's interesting how we see things connecting, even though it's not 100%, we still see things connecting from the Old Testament. Okay, everybody, don't want to hold you long. I hope that you're having a blessed day. And remember to look over that PowerPoint for Leviticus. Take care and have a very good one.